Hello and welcome to the latest episode of the Glasgow Motorway Archive podcast with Stuart and John. John, how are you?
I'm not too bad. How are you, Stuart?
I'm fine, John. Very busy as usual.
Me too, but we always find time to do these podcasts.
Yes, we do indeed.
Thank goodness.
It's nice to be back again. So what are we talking about this month?
Well, this month we're going to be talking just about the Monkland Motorway, which we haven't actually covered just in itself. We've always included that in something else, and it's an important and fascinating story. We get asked a lot of questions about this. So, the Monkland Motorway.
That is, of course, part of the M8.
Yes.
To the east of Glasgow.
Oh, they know all of this, Stuart.
Well,
They're all our dedicated listeners and fans. They're all experts. I'm joking.
Some people might not be.
We will fill you in, don't worry. Okay, before we do that, we do have some other business to attend to just before we start.
Do we?
Okay. Yes, we do. First thing I would like to say, it's a good opportunity here to thank the supporters of Glasgow Motorway Archive, in particular Eastford Excavations, who are our main supporter. These guys are fantastic. You know, and they give you the support to allow, Stuart and myself to bring you these podcasts and all the fantastic things they share. Check these guys out. The best way to see what they do. They're a civil engineering contractor based in Lanark, and you can see them on Twitter. So if you go in and look at EastfordEX, and you can see some of the work that these guys do, civil engineering, site clearance, environmental kind of work. Okay, so thank you to Andy and the team. It's only fair to mention them.
For their kind support and their support this year, as well as allowing us to continue with the podcasts, has also enabled us to ramp up the rate at which we're getting through some of our massive, huge slide collection that we have. And we estimated something like we had 15,000 photographic slides. We have probably scanned now about 10% of those. I would say it's a long process.
All self-delivered.
Yes, indeed. So we are getting through them, and we will be sharing some of these on social media through the next year or so, and some of the celebrations, and particularly on the website and on the new galleries and things that appear on there. And so
you're not giving yourself enough credit here, Stuart, but because you're getting a lot of these slides, some of them are in quite bad condition.
Yeah.
You're doing a lot of cleaning up as well, so we're actually having to restore a lot of these, so there's a lot of desk work involved.
Yeah, it's not just the scanning, it's all the other parts that come with that. And the naming and the registering and making sure we know where it is and all that as well. So, it's quite a long process, but it's good that we're finally getting into it and getting on with it. So, again, as you say, thanks to the supporters for that. And, of course, if anybody wants to support the work that we do, get in touch. We're more than happy to take any good offers of support or sponsorship or anything like that on board.
Yeah, absolutely. Brings me on to my second order of business before we go talking about the Monkland. Okay. Now, our last podcast that went out, it was really popular, and it was about the city deal.
Yes.
And it was a bit of an update podcast on some of the road projects in Scotland, particularly local authority ones with city deal.
Yeah.
But we missed some out.
No, we didn't.
We didn't. We did. Some people got in touch and said, well, hold on, you've spoken about Glasgow, you've spoken about Perth, but you didn't speak about Stirling. And they're absolutely right, we did. And we went and looked into it. In fact, there's a lot of city deal stuff out there maybe we didn't cover, but in particular Stirling do have their own plans.
Right, okay. I must admit, I wasn't entirely aware of Stirling either. I mean, I know we spoke about Falkirk in particular, and I've seen some stuff about that. So what's going on up in Stirling now?
There is a master plan there, but from a roads perspective, the proposal is for like a new link road through the council's existing Viewforth site, which houses the authority's headquarters. The new road, and it will be known as the Viewforth Link Road, will run between St Ninian's Road Junction and Snowdon Place and the Linden Avenue roundabout.
So is this like a sort of bypass of the main city centre there?
Yeah, I mean, they've always wanted to kind of complete their inner ring road, so to speak. So it is a bit of an urban road scheme. It's not massive, but it is there. You can see the plans and everything for it, because it's always better to look at these rather than us try and talk you through them. Yeah. If you go and just really Google Stirling City Deal and that Viewforth Link Road, you will see this. So on Stirling's council's website, you'll see that too.
So what was the other thing then that we wanted to bring up?
We timed this, our last episode, not that well, because about a couple of weeks after we put the episode out, the STPR came out.
Oh, yes.
So this is the Strategic Transport Projects Review, and this is a Scottish Government document through Transport Scotland that's come out, which lists for the next 20 years the schemes, projects, and the strategy for transport for the next.
And this is for all forms of transport.
It is rail, sustainable things, active travel, road, and it outlines what schemes they are investigating to take forward, and some stuff that's also out with the scope of the study, such as local roads. This is only for
for the main trunk road.
For the main trunk road things in the railways and stuff like that, and also things that they have ruled out as well. Now, this would take 10 podcasts to cover in its entirety.
Yeah.
So please, if you go onto Transport Scotland's website, you can actually see this, and there's loads of documents there. They're pretty heavy reading.
Yeah.
To go through, but you can look through a list of schemes that are taken forward and not taken forward, and maybe we can cover some of this in future episodes as they finalise where they're going to go with it.
Yeah, so I mean, if you look at the appendices at the back of the report, excuse me, it gives you a list of projects that are being taken forward to be considered at the next stage, a list of projects that were considered to be out with the scope of the review, and a list of projects that will not be taken forward.
Yeah.
So there's a lot to read through there. There's a lot of
we're not even going to summarise it because there is a lot there.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, good read. So that takes care of that. I don't think there's any addendums we need to add for previous podcasts. That being said, let's just move over and start talking about the Monkland.
Yeah, that's why we're here.
That's why everyone's here.
Yeah,
okay,
exactly. So the M8 Monkland Motorway then, will I give everyone a broad overview of what that is, where it is?
Please do.
Okay, so that is the section of the M8 motorway that runs from Junction 8 at Baillieston all the way through to Junction 15 at Townhead. Okay, so the eastern section of the city centre aspects of the motorway.
3-lane and some case 4-lane sections.
Exactly. So this was built as 3 separate contracts, although initially envisaged as being 2. Technically there's a 4th contract, which I'll tell you about. But whether that's part of the Monkland Motorway or not, well, who knows? We need to decide. The first stage saw the construction of the motorway from Townhead all the way to Cumbernauld Road at Junction 12. Okay, that was completed in May of 1975. Now, it was originally planned that the entire route would be finished by 1975, but the economic situation in the early 70s meant that they had to slow down the progress a wee bit and cut back. So that's why the eastern sections were a bit slower,
a bit later,
coming online. So stage 2 was originally planned to run from Cumbernauld Road at Junction 12 all the way through to the Glasgow city boundary, which sits halfway between Junction 8 and 9. But where
the rail underbridge is.
Exactly, yes. Yeah. When they discovered that there were a lot of difficult ground conditions, particularly around the Junction 9 Easterhouse area, and they realised there was going to have to be a lot of advanced works undertaken there to stabilise ground, cap off old mine workings, that sort of thing, they decided to split Stage 2 into 2 separate contracts. And we ended up Stage 2A and Stage 2B. Now, Stage 2A, it was completed in June of 1979. And
quite late on.
Yeah, it was only a short stretch that ran only from Junction 12 to Junction 11 at Steps Road. And then Section 2B came along and it opened in April of 1980, and that then completed the section from Junction 11 at Steps Road all the way through to the Glasgow boundary. Now, this is where this 4th contract comes in that I was talking about, because as part of the second stage of Baillieston Interchange, which saw the high loop, slip roads and various other parts, and the M8 actually through that junction in the lowest level.
But just remember, the M73 was already there, wasn't
That's right,
it?
yeah. So the second stage of the interchange and all these other additional slip roads, like for the A89 and for the M8, they were taken forward by the Scottish Office rather than Glasgow Corporation, okay, but designed and built in such a way that it tied in with the Monkland Motorway as it approached.
Yeah.
Okay, so
And the
they
A8.
all opened in April 1980. Okay, so in effect, Stage 2 runs all the way through to Junction 8. But contractually was actually only to the railway as far as the Glasgow Corporation's input was involved. So design-wise, it's a different one. It's an interesting one because the Glasgow Corporation had obviously let out contracts to Scott Wilson and Fairhurst and Halcrow to design things like the Woodside section of the Inner Ring Road, the Kingston Bridge, the Clydeside Expressway. The corporation councillors said, hang on a minute, is there not some way that our people can do this work? Can we not design some of these roads? And by this stage...
Rather than outsourcing it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And by this stage, they had actually started putting together their own motorways and expressways design team. And that was headed up, as we know, by Andrew Davis. Andy Davis is a good friend of ours and has helped us with a lot of stuff. And Andy basically put together a team working below a guy called Benny, who headed up the roads department section of the corporation at that time. And they got to work on designing the Monkland Motorway. So everything from Junction 15 out to the Glasgow boundary was designed in-house. Yeah.
But you say this, right, and I hope I'm not going to torpedo a point you're going to make later, but the Monkland Motorway appears in the highway plan for Glasgow, which was done by Scott Wilson.
Yeah, so the line of the motorway, yes,
right,
was selected by Scott Wilson, confirmed by Scott Wilson, because in the 1950s, the corporation had already determined that they wanted to bypass Edinburgh Road and Alexandra Parade, and they knew that the Monkland Canal, which was lying unused at that time, offered a good line for a new road.
It was a corridor that was already there. Yeah,
exactly. So when Scott Wilson got to work in 1960 on their own studies, the corporation basically said, we want you to include this route in this corridor. So the Monkland Motorway was already kind of predefined, by that point. They had made a decision in the 1950s to close the Monkland Canal to navigation. Afterwards, it became a bit of a safety issue and a bit of a nightmare for them because a lot of kids were drowning in it, and there were a few campaigns, I believe, from parts of the East End, from groups of mothers and other people to actually have the canal in filled.
Yeah, because it wasn't really maintained, was it?
That's right.
It was just left as a kind of a stagnant bit of water running through.
So when all this was all agreed, it was then considered, it's a suitable line, for a potential road. And then Scott Wilson then came along and confirmed in their own studies that, actually offered a good way to connect to the new motorway system to the east of Glasgow without creating new severance, splitting existing communities. The line of the canal had been there for hundreds of years. Okay, so that kind of takes us to the first stage of how the project was delivered, and that they had to deal with the canal. Now, it wasn't a case that they could just make the canal go away. The water that was running from the canal actually supplied a lot of industry in Glasgow, particularly around about Pinxton and in Springburn and then, to the north of the city centre. So they knew they had to retain that flow of water. And what they decided was they would pipe the canal. And I think we've spoken about this before, that the canal still exists, but in two pipes beneath the motorway or to the side of the motorway. Not very far away.
Which is still there, needs to be maintained and accessed and things like that.
And millions of gallons and litres of water are still thundering through those pipes every day.
And, going somewhere.
Yeah, so the canal, the existing canal, which is still there, disappears just at Cool Hill, which is just to the north of Bargedy, near Coatbridge. The canal disappears there into two pipes at the end of the towpath.
It goes into a culvert.
Goes into a culvert, disappears, and then reappears at Pinxton Basin, just to the north of the city centre. The entire section between these 2 points is piped. The first phase of the canal piping was actually from Pinxton all the way out to Cumbernauld Road, the Black Hill locks. That was delivered first in advance because to construct the Townhead interchange and part of the inner ring road at Woodside, there was parts of the canal there that had to be dealt with. So the first contract dealt with that. And then a second later contract dealt with the section from Black Hill out to Cool Hill at Bargedy. The first section of the canal piping was actually designed by Scott Wilson as well. The second stage, I believe, was dealt with by the corporation itself. Interestingly, we don't actually have contractor information for that work. That's something, but I have never been able to pin that down.
So these were advanced works to get it buried and out of the way. As you say, you couldn't just get rid of it.
No.
Now, it brings me on to a question here, is saying Monkland Motorway, but why is it called the Monkland Motorway? When I think of Monklands, I think of a hospital out in Airdrie.
Well, the Monkland Canal.
Is it just named after the canal because it went off? Is it as simple as that?
It is. I mean, historically, Baillieston and other parts around Baillieston were part of Monkland, the Monkland area, Old Monkland. But local government reorganisation in the 70s saw Baillieston included in Glasgow District. For the first time, it was taken away from Lanarkshire. And so there's things like that. So the Monkland name actually was more about you were heading in the Monkland direction.
Yeah, because if you follow the similar kind of nomenclature that they used for things like Renfrew Motorway and Trossachs Motorway and Stirling Motorway, you'd think it'd be called the Edinburgh Motorway.
Yeah, well, you think about it. You think about the Renfrew Motorway, you're heading towards Renfrew. Trossachs, you're heading to the Trossachs. Ayr, you're heading to Ayr. So they were just continuing that for the Monkland. You were heading to the Monkland area. So that was the sort of primary reason for that. So as I mentioned earlier, so the corporation decided to design the Monkland Motorway internally. I think that disappointed some of the consultants, like Scott Wilson and Fairhurst. I don't think they were entirely happy about that.
They wanted to do that because Scott Wilson, as you say, had basically they put the line on the map and go, that's fine, it's here. But then it was the detailed design, what we would probably call DMRB stage 2 or 3, that it was now actually taken forward by with. But the interesting thing is, this was Strathclyde Regional Council.
It was
corporation then became council.
So the corporation were entirely responsible for stage 1, and stage 1 opened literally days before the end of the corporation and the beginnings of Strathclyde Region in 1975. So Strathclyde then inherited the design of the section from Junction 12 all the way out to the boundary from there. Now, I know certainly speaking to John Cullen over the years, he certainly held a view that the original intention was that the Monkland was going to be finished before the Renfrew motorway, but they were quite slow in getting up to speed with the requirements for designing motorways and stuff like that, and that actually delayed it a bit. And then obviously the financial crisis came along as well. So basically what happened was the Renfrew motorway was finished in 1976 in its entire length.
Connecting up the bypass with the inner ring road.
Yeah. I think they'd originally hoped that stage 2, the Monkland, would probably have been finished in advance of the Renfrew, but it didn't quite play out like that.
Okay.
Yeah. So I'm going to try and get us some contractor information as well for the Monkland, because I know people like to know who built what. Certainly in terms of stage 2B, that was actually initially let to WC French, who then became Kier Construction.
Yeah. Okay.
Yep. So you remember Kier?
Oh yeah, I remember. I mean,
Yeah.
Kira's still kind of going around at this time. Do you know? Just to go back on you had an earlier point that you made, Stuart, which was that the corporation and Strathclyde corporation became Strathclyde, decided to design in house. Now I think with councils and local authorities, that they wouldn't generally do that now at all. I mean, they don't have teams of designers and things like that actually in-house.
That's right. We've kind of tended to go back the way again, where it's the consultants that are involved in this work. Yeah,
exactly.
That all kind of came to an end in '96 when the big regions and the big authorities kind of were broken up, and they lost a lot of the sort of skills that were there to allow for that. Whether it was cheaper than letting to consultants, actually I'm not sure. No doubt someone's done an analysis of that over the years.
It's
but
probably cheaper with this expertise is to try and maintain a team of people to keep up to speed with all the standards on these things. So.
Absolutely, yeah, absolutely.
So, Monkland Motorway, I mean, we've discussed there the route that it's going. We've also discussed, some of the stages and who was responsible for each section that's go through. But also, I think another thing to note with it is it was that point, because it came after the Renfrew motorway, there was the time that the M8 was completed across the city.
Yeah, that's right. So that completed the first target of the highway plan.
You had a dual carriageway then, basically all the way from Newbridge roundabout way in the east, all the way through to
Bishopton.
To Bishopton and
Greenock.
Greenock.
Well, not quite Greenock at that point, but almost Greenock, yeah. So stage 2B, as I mentioned, was WC French, then Kier. Stage 2A was Watlings, our old friends.
Our old friends
Watling Civil Engineering, who were involved in many, 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 many projects. Do we want costs as well? Will it give costs?
Why
for
not?
Projects?
We're here, yep.
So 9.5 million for stage 2A, which doesn't sound like an awful lot. Nowadays would probably be well over 100 million.
If not more.
Stage 2B was 12.5 million. That's maybe not a surprise. We'll talk about stage 1, and I'm going to come back to that awkward contract at the end. So stage 1, as I said, designed by the corporation, cost £10.6 million. Now, that's quite a bit earlier, so that's quite a lot of money.
Yeah.
That's probably...
Now, if we consider like stage 1 as a section just now, which is dual 5 lanes, which makes up a kind of part of that, but it wasn't originally like that. That was added later when the M80 came in.
Yeah, that's right. Although I believe, and John Cullen told us that section was the first dual 4 section of motorway to be designed and opened as such. Yeah, exactly. And that was constructed by Costain Civil Engineering. I think this is the only section of motorway in the Glasgow area that Costain were involved in. I know they built various projects elsewhere, but in Glasgow, I think Monkland Stage 1 is the only one. Now, that awkward contract at the end, that design wasn't by the corporation, that was Babty Sean Morton, who were responsible for all of Bailston interchange in the M73. So they were responsible for that. The contractor on that one was Cementation Construction.
Another one you don't hear very much of in the Glasgow area,
Yeah, that's right. That cost £6.5 million. Which is actually quite a lot for considering it's a small stretch, but the number of structures that were involved in there. I think there were 10 bridges built as part of that contract, the first 11 built as part of the M73, and the second batch of 10 built as part of this contract. So actually about 40 million, over 40 million pounds there, say.
Yeah,
around 40 million pounds of construction there, which if you take it all on now would be, quite a
you'd be looking, if you were building an urban motorway like that from scratch, going through with the junctions, if I know you're adjusting for inflation, but if we look at the requirements now and the surveys and the consultation fees, you're looking at a scheme that would be an equivalent of price to the M74 completion, hundreds of millions, nearly £1 billion for something like that.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and
the acquisition fees alone. I mean, again, at these times, you say they had a clear corridor going through there, but these places have been developed ever since. Exactly.
When you include the canal piping and the advance contracts for the mine works, you're probably well over £40 million of money at that time.
Yeah.
So that is a huge amount of money compared to the Renfrew motorway. It was it's almost double. The cost. So just to bring that into perspective.
So we spoke about planning, spoke about a lot of the design, some of the costs and so on. Do we have much information about construction difficulties? I mean, you mentioned there was some difficult ground conditions in some of the areas. Is there anything anecdotal that we've picked up from people?
Well, we know there was a lot of issue with ground conditions, and they found a hell of a lot of peat in the area between junction 10 and 11, and there were a lot of slopes that weren't quite stable.
This is not what you want for road construction, because it leads to kind of structural issues later on.
Yeah, what we've been told is that when you're driving between junction 10 and 11 and you look to the south, towards the Queensley Industrial Estate, there's that very long slope with just a gradual incline on it.
Yeah, that's right.
That was done basically because of the ground conditions. It was felt that to have a steep slope in there was just going to invite problems.
I found it boggy. I mean, I've walked in it.
It's very boggy in there, very wet. Yeah. Again, it was very well suited to the canal going through there. Very boggy, marshy conditions all around that area. So that's why there's sort of gentle slopes on either side of the motorway there rather than anything particularly steep.
Was anyone not in favour of the Monkland Motorway? Now, we often talk about controversial sections such as Charing Cross or when the M77 Aero route came. Was there any protest around this road? I know that it was criticised by some as being potentially unnecessary because you already had a high-capacity Edinburgh Road.
Yeah, some felt that Edinburgh Road, the three-lane Edinburgh Road, dual three-lane Edinburgh Road, was more than sufficient, and the corporation took the view that actually they would quite like to downgrade Edinburgh Road.
Into a kind of boulevard type thing. Yeah. There was an environmental angle as well.
That's right, because you've got properties facing onto Edinburgh Road, in places. And then at the Alexandra Parade end, they really had to bypass that because that was single carriageway, 2-lane. Technically it was 4-lane, but because of the parking and various things on either side, it was only ever 2 lanes for Alexandra Parade for through traffic. That was the main A8 to the east towards Edinburgh. It was totally overloaded at that time. So they were always going to have to bypass that in some way. We know there was some criticism from those who lived quite near to Cumbernauld Road. So like Maxwelton Avenue, that kind of area around about junction 12.
Yeah, because it's very much an urban motorway. You are going very close to people.
There was some criticism from some residents there, some concerns, perhaps would be the better way to put that. And we know that the people who lived there were amongst the first in Scotland to be given compensation as a result of changes in the law that came about around 1973, where people who lived next to new roads were actually compensated for the first time.
Because of the noise or vibration.
Yeah, exactly. And I think we were told previously that there were some of the properties there that faced the motorway were given triple glazing. Although we've seen some stories from people on Facebook, on our Facebook, who've commented to say that it wasn't particularly useful and that it was still quite noisy. So we know there was some criticism there. As for to go east of there, actually, the vast majority of stage 2A and 2B were built through empty, undeveloped land at that time. And we've got a whole load of slides that were taken in advance of construction. And I was amazed at the actual lack of property that was round about at that time. So I get the impression that the motorway itself was probably approved and well along the way to construction before the houses started to pop up.
I was going to say, Easterhouse, Ruchesey and these kind of places around there, they have, these were areas where they put up quite a lot of housing in these areas around the time, and in the same kind of vein as comprehensive redevelopment, they probably fit in with this, as you say, empty land and these houses going in.
Exactly, yeah.
So the next kind of component of this conversation would be that the Monkland Motorway does have its telltale signs that there was meant to be more, and we can talk about some later developments that came along with it as well and what we think of it. So there are a few things that we noticed. Now, there are very, very wide verges in some areas on the road, almost a lot of room for say, another motorway to come in. What can you tell us about that? So
the Monkland Motorway is actually quite unique. And we people like us could pick out the Monkland Motorway, within seconds of being shown a picture of it, just because it is very different to other parts of the M8. And we'll talk about some of the specific features in that later. But you're right, there were plans for bigger things. And if we think of Provan, first of all, at junction 13, and in fact, we could actually take it back back at junction and start at junction 14. Because when the Monkland was finished at junction 14, the Blockhairn Link Road wasn't actually complete. And neither was the road that takes you down to Denniston,
Yes.
to Alexandra Parade. Next
One
to the
that
park.
goes from the train station up.
Yeah. Neither of these two
View
links were
Park
there.
Avenue.
Yeah. So neither of those links were in place at that time. So junction 14 at that time actually continued as a long motorway slip up towards the back end of Royston.
That's right. And
Yeah.
it would dump people on what looks like here, Blockhairn Road.
Yes.
So that's what's called the Blockhairn
Yeah.
Link Road.
So a couple of years later, the Blockhairn Link Road came along and provided a proper connection to the north, to the new fruit market and the industrial areas there. And then a few years after that, they actually completed the other section to the south, down into Denniston. As part of the highway plan, they recommended the junction 14 slips as an opening up of access to the Denniston area and roundabout there. And it is a pretty well used junction.
Now, I find it very handy. I
Yeah.
use it as an escape from the East End
Yeah.
when coming up and going up there and back on at 14.
Yeah, exactly.
If in
So
particular, yeah.
that was a good sort of indicator. That was a temporary set up for a while. Then we came to Provan, and for the first few years at Provan, all we had were east-facing slip roads that connected to Provan Road.
Yes.
And they existed until the completion of the M80 Steps bypass in 1992, at which time obviously it was a direct free flow connection to the motorway that was provided.
So a fork junction
Yeah.
was basically put in here. And this is when the section that you were talking about earlier, between 13, 14, 15, which was dual four
it
lane,
was widened.
became fit. So that's why there's no hard shoulders there.
That's right, yeah.
You
So,
know.
so they locally used the hard shoulders. They added hard shoulders where it was cheap and easy to do so,
Yeah,
but around about other
discontinuous.
bridges and things. Yeah, there's
That's
none.
fine.
So
the,
then,
the plan at Provan, though, I mean, we only got kind of half there.
Yeah.
Because this was also going to be the connection for the East Link motorway.
yeah, so if you think of the way the M80 comes in from the north and joins the M8 as a fork,
Yeah.
there should have been an alternative to that, a mirror image of that coming from the south and joining as a fork to the east.
Yeah, so
and
if
that
you-
would have been the East Link motorway.
If you're coming from Edinburgh
Yeah.
direction, heading westbound, you could then go south.
Yeah. And if you look at the slip roads, the westbound off slip and the eastbound on slip, you can see that there were intentions for there to be more there. It's more obvious in the eastbound on slip where there's a very wide section of the slip road that just is stubbed off. It doesn't go anywhere. That should have been the southbound connection from the M80 to the M8 eastbound.
Yeah, that's very wide and
yeah.
big, yeah.
So there would be a direct connection from the M80 to the M8 eastbound there, and also for the Eastlink motorway northbound to the M8 eastbound. So that's why that one's so wide. And likewise going west on the Provan off slip, you can see that was probably intended to go somewhere else as well. It just kind of tails off and ends at a T-junction.
Yes,
at the moment.
that's right. It's all a bit of a funny arrangement, yeah.
Now, people might wonder why it's dual 4 lanes between junction 12 and 13 as well, because that's dual 4. It's not so obvious now because lane 1 is hatched off.
It's an auxiliary lane that allows for a drop and off and on drop.
Whereas originally it was just four lanes of equal, significance. And again, the reason for that was because it was to allow weaving and merging for those motorways, between the East Link and the
You would
Stirling
have had
motorway.
all of that traffic that because the strategic traffic actually would have been using a lot of this as well.
Yeah.
You know?
So there would have been a lot of merging there. So that's why that section is dual 4. From there, heading east, junction 12 had no temporary setups, but you come to junction 11 and you'll see there's a few wide verges there.
So yes, I'm just looking at the maps here. So there was another motorway, and this was actually the North Link.
Yep.
This was where the North Link was meant to tie in. Now, if you do look at the maps around about junction 11, you can see this clear green strip that heads north from that junction, a gap. There's actually now there's a primary school in there now, to be honest.
Avenue End, I think that primary school's called,
Something like that. I'm seeing it's going past like kind of Gothamlock, Gilbert Field Medical Centre, Craig End, and these places, and that's where the North Link motorway would have come off from the M8, the Monkland Motorway, and headed north.
And that would have been a fork interchange as well.
Yes.
So that was designed for traffic heading east or heading west.
Heading west to go to the north parts of the city.
Yeah.
So there is a whole lot of empty space in that part of the world. There is actually a dual carriageway road from junction 11 that heads north. So you can see how wide that is.
That was all intended to be part of the North Link. There's plenty of space in there. As you say, if you look in the map, you can see all the green space. That would have gone over the M80, but there would have been a full interchange with the M80 at Royston, roughly where junction 2 is now. And then the North Link would have continued sort of a northwestwards from there, almost along the line of the Bishop Briggs Relief Road that's been constructed over the last few years.
Yeah.
That would have involved some of that line as well. Eventually meeting up with Springburn Expressway before heading west and meeting the Maryhill Motorway and becoming the Lomond Motorway, and eventually ending up at
there's your
Great Western
northern
Road.
bypass, eh?
Yeah, exactly.
So when are they going to build that then, Stuart?
Yeah, well, I couldn't comment on that.
They're not.
Couldn't comment on that.
Okay.
Yeah.
So any other telltale stuff?
No, that more or less sums it up. There has been some interesting things that we've discovered over the years. Junction 10, for example.
So I was going to say recent developments.
Yeah. So Junction 10, Westerhouse Road.
The fort.
What they built, Glasgow Fort. What they built there wasn't what was outlined in the highway plan. And it's not what's in most of the corporation documents either, but when Strathclyde came along, they changed it. Originally, at the south side of Westerhouse Road, there was going to be a large roundabout. So you've got the dual carriageway coming over the bridge from Easterhouse. Then they were going to have a big roundabout that links in with Bartybeath Road and some of the other connections about there. But for some reason, Strathclyde decided...
Road and everything, yep.
Strathclyde decided not to do that, and it just became a fairly simple...
it's an at-grade signalised junction now, yep.
Exactly. Obviously, that became much busier when Glasgow Fort was constructed in 2004.
But they changed the junction when that opened. That junction got a bit of an upgrade, didn't it?
Well, so the eastbound off-slip is a completely new off-slip. The original off-slip was removed. That no longer exists. All the others are as they were when it was existed. However, at the north side of the motorway where that new eastbound off-slip was built, they put a roundabout in, and that's your access to Glasgow Fort. So that area there was amended to suit that. I believe there's also plans or a requirement on Glasgow Fort to widen the westbound off-slip.
So if you're coming from Edinburgh, that's quite tight.
Yes.
That is really quite a tight little loop, and it takes you up there, so they want to widen that or improve that.
I believe that loop is actually the third tightest on the Glasgow system.
Do you know what the crazy thing is, just looking at that? You don't need a loop there. In fairness, you might have the room to actually just sling up a normal slip.
Yeah, was it not to do with property that used to be there that's not there anymore? I think that might be the reason.
There's nothing. I mean, I'm being a Google engineer here. This is terrible. But I am just looking at it and going, you could probably squeeze something in there. But
I think there was a council housing to the south of the motorway there that existed at that time, had been built in the 60s, but has since been demolished and replaced with new housing.
There is some new housing in there, and somebody in these houses is probably listening, going, "John, shut up! Don't want that. Right, just leave it." So no, it's just looking at the map there, so that's fine. What? I mean, that's some changes. I mean, we're heading nearer to Edinburgh now. Now, the motorway now between Junction 10 and Junction 8, so between the Fort and Baillieston, is a lot different to the way it was. Particularly on the mostly on the eastbound carriageway. So this has now been widened. It used to be dual 3 lanes. It's now 3 on one side heading towards
4 on the east,
and 4 on the east. The big split. So that was done in 2017.
Yeah. So the 2 lanes continue through to Edinburgh. One drops off to the High Loop to go south on the M73. Another one drops off to the A8 to allow you to go east on the A8 if you want to access Coatbridge and parts like that. Because obviously the new M8 doesn't have a direct connection to Coatbridge or Bells Hill or any of the major towns in that corridor. It was designed for through traffic, strategic traffic. So they designed it in such a way that the A8 became the main corridor for local movements. Yeah. So there's a dedicated lane there for that now, which didn't exist previously. Now, there are Monkland motorway features that make the Monkland.
The Monkland,
yeah.
It's not elevated or depressed. I was always said that compared to others.
What would be a standout Monkland motorway feature to you?
Do you know that just like a landmark on it or something complete?
Something about the road itself.
Well, okay, I don't want to sound a bit too flippant here, but it works really well. It's not congested.
All right, fair point. Well,
I find it works quite well now.
Pre-M74 in the morning peak, you often found there was a lot of congestion in the Monkland motorway. Technically, there is still congestion in the Monkland at the far west end as well. Between
I'm talking if you're going from kind of 12 onwards, it's the motorway that tends to behave itself in terms of traffic management. I'm trying to think.
I was thinking more like features. So to me, and people won't have noticed this, but they will after I tell them. So the high mast lights in the Monkland motorway look the same as high mast lights anywhere else, but they're not. They're only 24, 25 metres rather than 30, 35 metres.
So the little masts.
Yeah, so they're smaller, they're shorter.
I actually didn't know that.
Yeah,
I've been up looking at these as well, been up in the mute.
Some of them also only have 6 lights rather than 8, 10 or 12 that you see elsewhere. So they're a bit smaller in scale. Okay. Other things that stand out for me, it still has its original red hard shoulders in places. They've never gone away. And the structures, the overbridges on the Monkland Motorway Stage 2 are the only bridges on the Glasgow section of the M8 that have steel components. So they have steel beams and concrete decks. All the other bridges in Glasgow, from Monkland Stage 1 all the way through the Inner Ring Road, Kingston Bridge, Renfrew Motorway, all the way out Bishopton and Renfrew Bypass. Renfrew Bypass does have some steel beams.
It does.
But in the actual Glasgow Corporation section, the inner section that we often talk about, is the only section with steel beams.
So you can look out for that.
So that's different as well.
We often talk about the consulting architects that were brought in, Halfords. Were Halfords involved in Monkland?
Yeah, Halfords were involved in the Monkland.
So it was made pretty as well.
Yeah, so it was. So we know that the box beam barrier that was there originally, the original safety barrier, was painted white to match the colour of the high mast lights in the gantries. That was an aesthetic choice. On the part of Halfords. Also, all the tree planting that was done. The Monkland is surrounded by trees.
It's landscaped quite well. You've got these nice wide verges and stuff. Just forgot, yes, it has Glasgow gantries on it as well.
Yes, it does. Although some of them were removed.
Did it not have them on them from the start?
Yes, it did.
It did. It wasn't like the Renfrew bypass and it got them later.
No,
it had them on there.
No, the Monkland had them from day one. Although some on the eastbound side were removed and upgraded with a new style.
That's right, but they're still holding out on the westbound side.
On the westbound side, they're still there, yeah. And most of them have been upgraded to the new LED internal illumination now as well.
Okay.
So that's been done. Other Monkland Motorway features. What
about that massive wall that you get at
Gartcraig? Yeah,
yes.
That's huge. I mean,
why is there a big bend there that goes around like that?
It follows the line of the canal, and again, there was existing housing up top and down below, and just with the rock cutting and the sort of ground conditions, it just made sense to follow the line.
Because we've had questions about the speed limits there and how they weren't sure what to set the speed limits at, and they've done some testing. Or is this an urban myth?
This is one of these things that annoys me, because I read it years ago when I started my initial research, years and years ago, that they decided that was designed to 60 mile an hour because of that bend. And what they did was they had advanced drivers come in and actually test the bend at various speeds to see how it handled, because I believe there was a bit of consideration between whether it should be 50 or 60.
Yes.
And eventually they said, no, 60 is okay, 70, no, that's too much.
Yeah.
60
you'll get away.
You'll get away with that, and 50 was considered too low. So it kind of, you step down from 70 to 60 at Steps Road, and then you go 60 to 50 when you get to Proven. Kind of similar to the way the M74 approaches in the south of the city as well. You step downwards from 70
they wanted
to 60
this ring, they did. They wanted this ring of speed limits, like in the core it'd be 50, and then it would probably go out to 60 in some areas, and then out to national speed.
And it's a good way to utilise road space as well, slowing the traffic down, lets the cars come closer together and you get a bit more capacity. They did have one or two issues after construction with the Monkland Stage 2B, and the ground conditions caused a bit of trouble. The pavement specification that they used actually led to a lot of cracking. Within a couple of years of it opening, long cracks formed in the hard shoulders, lane 1, and they had to dig a lot of it up in the 80s and replace it. But, where it was sort of deeper.
And when you're talking about pavement, we're not talking about footways. For anyone that gets concerned, because I get people get confused when I say this.
Yeah.
When we say pavement, is very much an engineering term
road surfacing,
for the road surfacing the asphalt. Yeah.
So they had to do a lot of work on that as well. God, what else can we say about the Monkland Motorway? Because it's
how do you think? I mean, I spoke about it being. I said that it performs quite well. I mean, what's your general opinions of it, or have you got any specific opinions of certain junctions? Going, this junction's really good because it does this, or something that you think could be better about it.
I remember the Monkland Motorway pre M74 completion, and there was eastbound queuing.
But that wasn't the Monkland's fault.
Junction 8. No, that wasn't the Monkland. That's the problem with the Monkland. The Monkland suffers as a result of problems that are
in the inner ring road.
That were the inner ring road in the west, and at that time was the A8 and issues at the east. There's nothing about the Monkland that I go, oh, I hate that. That really annoys me. Although the westbound slip road at junction 13, where you hit that T junction with Proven Road,
that's awful, isn't it?
That's not
now,
good.
There was plans, of course, to complete the East End regeneration route, which is a Glasgow City Council scheme where they were going to, what do they call the Clyde Gateway Road that goes past Celtic Park and all these kind of places, and that was going to be extended up there to connect properly, but there was never any plan to improve that junction. We now know that scheme's been shelved. Yeah. So who knows if that'll ever be improved?
Yeah. That is a shame, because that is quite awkward. I suppose Junction 13 can be quite annoying at peak times.
Yeah, it is.
With busy traffic.
I mean, even with the M74, that's where your back of your queues are. I've often called it the Proven problem because it's something that's very, very difficult to solve.
Yeah.
I think possibly it could handle it if there was no M80.
Yeah.
But the M80 is very busy. I mean, it's your main route into the city from the north. There's a lot of people that live a very high car ownership corridor that you have through there as well.
Yeah, and the commuter belt.
Really, the way to solve it is with an East Link. You know, a lot of these people probably coming from that direction of Cumbernauld, Bishop Briggs.
Well, that's why the East Link motorway was proposed, and the Clyde Gateway. The Clyde Gateway grew off the back of the plans for the East Link because they knew that there are a lack of good north to south connections in the East End.
When I feel the shelving of this thing, this East End regeneration route, Clyde Gateway Phase 3, which was, we know, the spiritual successor to the East Link, is a catastrophic misjudgment. You know, that we can feel that there'll be a price for that with these things, unless they can come up with some other transport solution to try and take the traffic off this junction.
Yeah, time will tell.
But this is all speculative conjecture.
Yeah.
So
the good thing about the Monkland is it has a lot of footbridges, so there's a lot of really good vantage points.
It's never been one that people moan about now. I mean, I know we share loads of things, and whenever it's anything in the city centre, people are particularly enamoured with certain sections of it and say, what did we lose as much as we gained? But the Monkland seems to kind of gracefully fit in with its surroundings.
Yeah, fairly uncontroversial.
I don't find it. I mean, compare it to its sister or brother, whatever the way you want to look at it, which is the Renfrew motorway. Far more urban in characteristics and cuttings and busier.
Yeah,
you know, stuff like that. I've always preferred that because I found it a bit more interesting than the Monkland. Yeah,
the Monkland is a much simpler piece of road. Yeah, even in engineering terms, the look of it. The Renfrew I often think is maybe not over-engineered, but it has a lot more to it, as you say.
Yeah,
everything feels a lot bulkier on the Renfrew, like the big concrete bridges, and you're in a lot of cuttings, and there's a lot of long railway bridges and things like that. And the Monkland just doesn't have.
It's a proper motorway.
Yeah, you could. Could say that. Yeah,
some good stuff there.
When it was completed across the city in 1980, and they finally had the motorway link. I believe that really within weeks. Was when congestion started to appear on the inner ring road because you finally had that link.
Things people could get to it.
And of course it was intended that some of these other motorways were going to come on stream shortly afterwards that never materialised.
And came through with it. But no, there you go. So, both you and I have done work throughout our careers which have been on sections of the Monkland Motorway. So I have spent a lot of nights out there, particularly very cold ones, if you remember, Stuart, when we were doing those works out there.
Oh yes, I remember that night, -8. Yes.
But it's quite something. I don't have anything I particularly dislike about it. I find the most impressive thing is at Gartcraig, with the walls there. The fort, a very, very busy junction. Seems to work for me all right at the moment. Junction 9, quite quiet.
Well, that was always intended.
It only has west-facing slips.
Yeah, that was always intended just for access to.
It's a kind of
to Easterhouse,
a local arrangement. But the upgrade in 2017 has made a difference as well. It gives you that much more breathing room.
No, definitely, yeah. So it's all in all, it's a good section of road.
Don't know if there's any point talking about any future plans for it. If there's any things, we did say
there are any.
For Junction 10 they might do something, but you never know.
Yeah, it had its big upgrade, obviously, so there's not really anything else planned at the moment. So
okay,
yeah, we'll see. Okay, I think that's enough on the Monkland. What else are we got on at the moment? Not much is the answer.
Well, I think we do have again, because of coronavirus, we have to do a lot of these things remotely.
Yeah,
we do have some talks coming up. In the future that we're going to do remotely. We've also got it's continuation of the scanning and digitising. And Stuart, you're probably best placed to answer how the website is going.
Yeah, no, the website's coming along nicely, but we've obviously added a few more routes and a few extra articles. That will continue through the year ahead. There's a lot of stuff planned. We've got pages coming up on the A82. What else? The A8. A74, so there'll be route pages for most of these things. Even some of the routes that are now gone will have some pages and some articles coming as well.
Ever since our podcast about the Ayrshire roads,
Yes.
we have had a bit of an increase
Yeah, we have.
in some people getting in touch, and we've even got some of our colleagues here at the archive focusing down in Ayrshire
Yep.
to find out more information, so we can follow up with a nice follow up.
There was a
podcast to that.
lot of interest in that Ayrshire podcast.
Yeah, because we've never covered it. I think it's an untapped gold mine of road history curiosity. Because no one has really looked into it.
No, you're right. You're right. And if we do come across more information, we'll share that very quickly. And of course, the website's going to have some Ayrshire pages on it as well going forward.
So we've got some good podcasts planned in the future.
Yes.
Coming up.
There's
We're
some
working
exciting
with Duncan to do an A1 podcast, the Scottish section of the A1.
Yep.
Don't worry, we're not going to be talking about Bedfordshire or anything like that. It's a Scottish A1 we'll talk about. And we're also going to have, hopefully, if we can do it, a special guest on soon.
Yes.
From another well-known roads website.
Yes.
Let's
be interesting to get some insights from others.
You're going to have somebody from the other side of the border to give us some insights and talk generally about things.
Yeah.
But let's not spoil.
No.
Let's see how that goes.
Well, let's not spoil that one. So, on that note then, I think that's all for this month. As
so.
always, you can find all episodes of this podcast on the usual providers, Spotify, Podbean, Apple Podcasts. It's always there. Please leave us a review.
Yep.
It's always good to hear what you think about what we're saying and how we're doing it.
If we could be doing it, if we could be doing it better or whatever.
Yep.
Alternatively, you can check us out on Facebook, on Twitter, on Instagram. Check out all the things we're doing there, and you can get in touch with us that way.
And of course, the website's there now as well. And don't forget, we also have the YouTube channel. You'll find us on there. We have more and more videos appearing on there every month as well.
We're like a media conglomerate now, aren't we?
Exactly.
Yeah.
But in the meantime, thanks for listening, and we'll see you soon.
See you later. Bye.
Bye.